Hey everybody, welcome back to Final Trade. What is wrong with the Dragons of Icespire Peak adventure and how do we fix it? So of course, Dragon of Icespire Peak is the mini campaign that comes with the D&D Essentials kit, which I think is a great product. You can get it for $15 to $20 and it is it's an awesome way to get people into D&D. But what's wrong with this? Now, what I'll say first, what's right with it? Everything from a standpoint of game mechanics, introduction to D&D, kind of cutting out some of the more tedious rules to make it more fun. It does all of that right. You know, for example, you don't count experience points. It simply says after you do some number of quests, your characters level up. You don't worry about counting experience points. But here's the problem with the story that is being told in this book. Obviously, we have the name Dragon of Icespire Peak, and we have this picture. Here's the main antagonist, Cryovane, the young white dragon, and of course you'll have these rules in here that say, hey, every time your players depart or arrive at a place, they're gonna have a chance to run into the dragon, and you roll for it, and you see if you have a miniature encounter with him. But of course, if you do 10 or more damage to him, he flies away back to his Icespire Hold fortress, and he does a long rest and regains all of his hit points. And so he kind of just is barely present throughout the campaign, and you might roll luckily and run into him, but he's going to fly away after you engage him a tiny amount. Or maybe you can be smart. You don't really have to engage him. You can just hide. But he's almost not even present in this campaign. And instead, you know, you do mission after mission, and these are really well put together little encounters. And you do all of these, and nobody's particularly concerned about the dragon. You know, Harbin, the town mayor, I guess you'd call him, he's kind of worried, and you know, in some of his dialogue he's talking about, you know, how big of a problem this dragon is, but he sends you out on all these quests that are unrelated to the dragon. And so you have these more immediate pressing threats to the town of Phandalin, which is the setting of this adventure, coming from all the orcs and the half-orcs that have been displaced from Icespire Hold, which is where Cryovane is living now. So he took over Icespire Hold, he displaced all the orcs who were living there, they came down out of the mountains, and now they're harassing the countryside. So they're the actual threat in this campaign. And in fact, you run into them a lot of times. You go up to the Woodland Manse, and you go to Falcon's Hunting Lodge, and you go to these other places, and you run into orcs. You run into them on the roads all over the place. And so they're the immediate threat here. And I really struggled, you know, after I first read this book and I started running this campaign, I really struggled with how do we tie this together so that Cryovane and the dragon is a part of the Dragon of Icespire Peak adventure. Because really this should be called Orcs of Icespire Peak. They should have just taken the dragon out. They should have come up with some kind of storytelling reason for the orcs to suddenly come down out of the mountains and start harassing Phandalin, and then just made it center around orcs. Because you've got this character in here. He's a half orc Anchorite of Talos, and his name is Granox. So he's the one named version of that character, and you know, he's kind of like the mini boss of the campaign in terms of difficulty, where Cryovane the dragon is the real boss. But in terms of storytelling and the climax of the whole adventure, defeating Granox is the climax of the campaign. And so I thought, how can we kind of like tie this together? How can we make the orcs a bigger story presence, because they're not so involved. They're not as involved as they should be from the storytelling perspective, despite the fact that they are the more pressing danger that your players are trying to deal with. And so what I did is I added 4 additional encounters. And so the first one was kind of a miniature encounter. And so you've got this quest back here called Umbrage Hill, and you go out and there's the windmill and there's the girl who lives there, and it's being attacked by a manticore, I think. And you kind of negotiate with the manticore and defuse the situation and save her. And so then you return back north to Phandalin to collect your reward. And so what I did is I said, well, on the way, you're going to be passing all these farms that are on the map. And I had the characters run into a farmer whose fields are being attacked by 4 of these boars. And as you know, the Anchorites of Talos can shapeshift into boars, so that'll be important later. But for now, there's just these 4 boars. They run around attacking his fields, and he's running around chasing them. But of course, there's 4 of them and 1 of him, and so he'll just chase one around, and then the other ones are rooting in the fields, destroying his crops. And so you get your characters to help kill the 4 boars and defuse the situation, and that's it. Then they go back to town. And over time, as they talk to townsfolk and they hear rumors and things, they will get information that these kind of attacks by these boars are more common. There's just more of these wild boars running around everywhere. And so that's kind of the second part, is the rumors and the news about the boars. And then the third is the boars make an actual attack on the town during the day. Just a whole horde of these boars come into the town, and they start like knocking stuff over, like raccoons on your porch or something. And they just start wrecking the place and goring people and stuff. And so you have this kind of like silly small battle between townspeople and maybe small guard unit or something against these boars. But then something happens. The last boar that one of your characters kills transforms back into an Anchorite of Talos as he dies, which is one of the things that happens if they're shapeshifted into a boar when they die. And so then this kind of reveals to your players, hey, this could happen. And there is actually there's a spot, I believe it's when your characters are on the way to the Woodland Manse quest, and they can run into a boar in the woods, and they will encounter it, but if they choose to engage with it, it'll turn into an Anchorite. So it might be revealed to them then instead that these can transform, and that there's something more than just wild boars attacking here. And so this will kind of make the whole orcs and half orcs and everything a little more like ominous. It makes them a little more important as they're attacking the town. There's rumors of them attacking people on the roads. Your characters run into orcs and half-orcs and anchorites and boars all the time. And so it makes it like it's an actual cohesive group that's posing a fully formed threat against Phandalin. And so as they go through and they do these other quests, especially the Manse, where they run into a bunch of boars in these bushes, and some of them are shape-shifted anchorites, it kind of makes it come together as more of a cohesive threat. And so then the fourth event that I added was boars, orcs, and half-orcs all assault Phandalin at once at night. And Granox is there. Remember, he's the named half-orc, or the named half-orc Anchorite of Talos. And he's there as kind of like a stronger named mob. And so they attack, and you have to get your players to help the townspeople defend the city and decide how much destruction is wrought based on how well your players perform. But ultimately, Granox escapes. Maybe he's wounded, maybe not. Just decide, what your players give you to work with. And then you can go on with the rest of these quests until you eventually defeat Granox. Okay? And so what that does is it puts all of this orc, half-orc, boar threat into its own cohesive storyline, and it makes up for the fact that Cryovane the Dragon does not really have a storyline. You could go quest after quest after quest without even seeing him, or talking about him, or anybody worrying about the fact that, hey, there's a dragon that flies around once in a while. Maybe if we're unlucky enough, we have a 5% chance of running into him between quests. So then you need a way to kind of make use of the fact that Cryovane is in here, that there's this Icespire hold quest where you go and you kill Cryovane. And so what I came up with to kind of incorporate that in a satisfying way from a storytelling perspective was, okay, you've defeated Granox, but now you still have all of these loose groups of orcs and half-orcs and things in the woods, and you need them to go away because just some other half-orc will rise up to kind of unify them again and lead a new threat against you. So, what if you dispatch the dragon from Icespire Hold and the orcs might be convinced to just go back over there and maybe leave you alone like they used to? And so, this can kind of provide you with the hook to get your characters interested to go into Icespire Hold. Because if you read through this book and you try to figure out how do my characters know where Icespire Hold is, it's not marked on the characters' version of the map. And in fact, there's some I forget exactly where in this book, but it talks about how you do that, and it's like, well, you can just send your characters hopelessly searching through the mountains trying to find Icespire Hold, and it's like, well, that's not very rewarding. Or you can have one member of this mercenary team that's camped out in here. He'll come to Phandalin to buy supplies, and you can interrogate him and maybe get information, and his horse knows how to get back. And so it's just the most tenuous, unrewarding kind of way of saying, here's how your characters know how to get here. And instead, what you can do is maybe you interrogate a wounded orc who speaks basic or something like that. And he'll tell you where Icespire Hold is. Or maybe you just tell your players, yeah, everybody knows where Icespire Hold is. It's a giant castle in the mountains. Duh, everybody knows. And so that will get your characters a convincing way to go there. It's still kind of after the climax of the action, but you can kind of think of it in terms of how a lot of video games will have some very difficult challenge that the player has to accomplish, but then they get a much easier reward challenge afterwards. And it's kind of like, hey, you beat the really hard, difficult boss. Now here's a slightly easier boss that you can, it's not a pushover, but it's a lot easier, and you'll get more good loot from it, and it'll be fun. And so that's what I think the way to kind of fix this adventure is just go ahead and embrace the fact that Cryovane is a minor character. Build the story up more with Granox being the main antagonist, and then Cryovane is he's kind of the cleanup. You need to kill him so that the orcs will leave Phandalin alone for maybe a longer period now. And I think that really kind of pulls together this adventure better. I mean, I think in reality, they probably should have just called this Orcs of Icespire Peak and ridden the dragon out of the whole thing. But, dragons are cool and they sell well. So let me know what you think. If you had a different take on how you change this or what you think you might do, let me know. I'd love to hear it. If you like this kind of content, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join me on Final Trade. I'd love to have you. Thanks a lot.